With the Rugby World Cup just under a year to go, there's lots of interest in the African teams that will be participating or hoping to participate in future Rugby World Cups. And now we're joined in studio by Louise, Otter and Kennedy Tsimba to chat about the Africa as One tour, taking rugby all over Africa. Thank you for joining us here in studio. Louise, let's start with you. What is Africa as One tour all about?
Okay, DHL being a sponsor of the Rugby World Cup and also being in every country in Africa, wanted to do something significant, ambitious for the Rugby World Cup. So we started in Cape Town 2 weeks ago, and we're driving through 45 countries in total. 42 of them are in Africa, and in each one we will be doing a number of things, including doing some rugby activations. We'll be passing a rugby ball through the countries. We've got mercy ships that will be giving away free glasses. We've got over 500,000 stationery items, pens, notepads, school sets to give away to the children. And we're going to be documenting everything in pictures, videos, and just showcasing what Africa's all about and how diverse it is.
Oh, that's fantastic. Kennedy, for somebody who's from Zimbabwe, who's played in South Africa, who's travelled all over the continent, how important is it that we get Africa interested in the game of rugby?
Oh, I think it's very, very important in terms of world rugby itself, because we've got such talented athletes. We've seen in athletics, we've seen in football itself, We've got such great athletes that are in Africa. And without programs like this, we won't be able to engage with them. And I think it's very important that we look at programs like this to really engage with some of these potential youngsters that can come through.
Africa is seen as a continent that loves its football. Is there interest in rugby?
Oh yes, I go around every day trying to preach to people that there is a lot of rugby, especially in schools rugby all over, in Nigeria, in Ivory Coast. I've played all of those teams, and some of my toughest games weren't even against Western Province or the Crusaders in New Zealand. It was against Namibia's and Ivory Coast. So rugby is very, very big. The following is massive, and I think it's just time that Africa and the stakeholders take note of that.
Louise, now you call this the Africa as One tour. How, through this program, are you going to get people interested in the sport?
In rugby. Well, what we're doing is, like every Saturday, we are having rugby clinics, and sometimes in the week, depending on where we get to in the country, we're introducing tag to start with, because we're there for such a short time. We don't want to introduce contact just yet, so we tag rugby so the kids can have a bit of fun. And we've about 300 to 500 rugby balls per country we're going to be giving away. So we will leave those with the local DHL country manager, and then he will, with the local schools or rugby clubs there, he will give those out to them to carry on. But what we found just in the last two countries, even if the kids have never seen this rugby ball before, it doesn't take them long to actually, get a grip of what it's about, and you can just see they're just so delighted to actually be holding the ball and doing something different, so that's...
Is this a one-time thing, or are you hoping to take it forward in a couple of years just to get more people interested and used to playing with the oval ball?
Well, we'd like to. We'll do this one first, and then hopefully with the balls we leave, and then we'll leave tag rugby sets behind that those guys will carry on, and then we can see what we can start doing next year after the Rugby World Cup.
Kennedy, I just want to talk about Africa's interest in the World Cup and moving forward. How do we get competitive teams like the Ivory Coast, like Nigeria, to play on the world stage?
Well, I think, the IRB are trying to get more competitions. But I think, the more the rugby culture can be grown. I mean, for me, leaving Zimbabwe, coming into South Africa itself, just trying to break into a provincial team here, purely because of the culture is so strong. Absolutely. You've got to first understand the culture. Then once you're in the culture, you can start expressing yourself as a player. So I think we've got to, as Africa as a whole, try improve the culture, whether it be through media, whether it be through, activation programs like this one. Really just get them understanding about rugby. A lot of parents feel that it's a dangerous sport, when it's, safety is one of the most important things that coaches are being, given out to, especially at tag rugby. That's why it was introduced, just to take that fear out. But it's very entertaining game itself, because even females are starting to play. I mean, the Rugby World Cup was on the other day. So I think it's not just a male-dominated sport. The introduction of female rugby, I think, is also important, because that brings families and all that into into the mix in trying to promote the game.
Should South Africa be leading the charge to develop rugby on the continent? I mean, we're very interested in our rugby, but we're not really taking it forward, are we?
Well, I think it's very important, and I use soccer as an example because the English Premier League soccer have got a lot of programs that they go out into Africa and create academies, Cape Town, Ajax, Cape Town, coming from the Ajax in Holland. Those types of synergies really help. So I think if there were more synergies like that from the unions here, because there's such a great knowledge wealth of rugby within this country, if that was just to be distributed, and it doesn't mean financially, but just knowledge itself is key to the development.
Namibia is one of the other teams, apart from South Africa, that will be playing in the World Cup next year. We actually need to get a point where we can, compete successfully. I mean, it's all well and good that we make up the numbers, but that's not the point.
No, it's not. I mean, we've seen that in the Soccer World Cup early on. I think what happens is a lot of the good players that are in these smaller countries, Zimbabwe has been robbed, plenty. But if a lot of the players would be able to be retained and stayed in those countries, I think a lot of countries would do well. Kenya would make good strides. So it's a matter of getting programs that we can engage with these players, get them to understand that there is national pride. Once that's there, that can help us, progress and become competitive at Rugby World Cups. Because some of the scores that we do receive aren't, they're not in good nature if you're trying to progress the game. But I think it takes time. You've got to have 4 or 5 year, plans in place. And that's what I've experienced with playing rugby here. The Currie Cup isn't won over just a couple of months. It takes 3 or 4 years of putting the systems in place and getting that right, and then, the development. And that's why I think a program like this can go far if given time to,
Oh, well, we will be chatting about the Currie Cup in just a minute, but I want to know, have you gone back home to Zimbabwe, maybe instilled in the sporting federations what you want to do for rugby in the country?
Yes, I'm in the process of now building a rugby high performance centre.
Wow.
So that's taking up a lot of my time, and trying to structure it, to get so that I don't improve teams, but improve individuals that are good at rugby. And give them not just skills training, but there's a lot of psychological training that goes into being a professional sportsman. So it's not about while you're playing, it's also about after you're playing. And I'm experiencing that now.
Yes.
There's a huge difference between playing when you're being spoiled and having to adjust to normal life, So I'm trying to get a holistical program into place. And also I do have an organization called Rugby Without Borders that also goes out there to use rugby as a tool to engage in general kids, social, economical issues and stuff like that.
Louise, just to touch on something that Kennedy spoke about, Rugby Beyond Borders, is that something that you guys are also trying to do? You've been to Lesotho, you've been to Swaziland. Are you trying to use this as a tool for change, maybe in the continent?
I think we're not there going to be in each country long enough to do that, but hopefully this is going to spark something that will carry on after we've gone, and especially in the countries with with the DHL people in each country, that they would be in, get a bit more involved with the local rugby, with the balls and stuff that we're leaving.
Now, Kennedy, you did talk about Currie Cup. It's the final this weekend. I'm putting your head on the block. The Lions and the Western Province, they've both been front runners this entire Currie Cup campaign. Quite difficult to choose who would be the front runner in the final. Yeah,
it's a difficult one because both teams have really played what I call exciting rugby. I would pay to go and watch both teams playing. I like the look of Western Province backline. The Lions forwards are dominating, so it's going to become backline forward competition. It's going to be tight. I think playing at home, Western Province might just have the slight edge, but I won't write off a surprise from the Lions, to come and win it, because I think they really have played, consistently good rugby. Yeah.
Just one last question. The Currie Cup is a very tough, strong competition over a good couple of weeks, but we can't seem to convert that form into international Super Rugby. Why do you think that is?
Well, I think what happens is that you know when I used to play Currie
Yes.
Cup, it was the leading competition in South Africa, and Super Rugby was just in a couple of months in the beginning of the year. So there was a lot of emphasis on the Currie Cup. The Springboks played and all that kind of stuff. So what happens is now the teams are diluted, which is good for the youngsters to come into the game. So it makes it very hard that these youngsters now have to transfer into Super Rugby next year when the Springboks all come back into their teams, and the teams that haven't made it, like the Sharks and the other teams, they become full strength. So it becomes tough for teams like the Lions and Western Province, up front when it gets to Super Rugby. But I think one of my points that I've raised is that New Zealand have really worked the system well, that they spread all their good players amongst all their teams. So they don't say that if you at Western Province, you must play for Western Province.
Yes.
If there's 3 flowers at Western Province, the one goes to one union, other one goes to. So you've got all your best players playing at all times.
Makes sense.
Which is why their teams do well. Whereas here we are more, if you're a blue baller, you stay at the balls. You're not going to help anybody else. So I think that's why we're struggling. Until that can be rectified, we're always going to be struggling, maybe having one team in the final, which is kind of sad, because we I think Super Rugby suits our style of play.
Kennedy and Louise, thank you very much for speaking to us. We saw your yellow Land Rover outside. Quite exciting times for the Africa as One tour. That, of course, was Louise, Otter and Kennedy Tsimba chatting to us ahead of the Africa as One tour, taking rugby all over Africa and creating interest in the sport.